Yes. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for coming back. So we have a plenary session, and we are very delighted to have with us today Dr. Paul LeBlanc, who is the former president of the New Hampshire University, one of the largest universities in the US, with more than 250,000 students. And Paul is the chair of the board of Matter and Space. So Paul will talk this afternoon about a subject that is of high interest for all of us, is AI. And the session will be chaired and moderated with Susanna Karakhanyan, who works at the Abu Dhabi government, ADEK, as Director for Higher Education Policies and Regulations, and is our 7th President of INQAAHE. So thank you, Paul. Thank you, Susanna, for this session. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, everybody, for coming back. Thanks, Fabrice, for introducing us. And I think that there is another merit to introduce Paul here. Paul, I always see your signature, Chief Bottle Washer. Could you please introduce yourself?
Should I explain that?
Of course. After lunch, we need some wake up, so this is the time to do so.
My wife and I are blessed to have 2 daughters, and I have been begging them to make us grandparents for the longest time, and finally our younger daughter relented. So 10 months ago, I became a grandfather. 10 months ago, I became a grandfather to Simon, who is the sort of center of our orbit in our universe, and we share new grandparenthood and the mania that comes with that. So yes, and my signature now says Chief Bottle Washer, which is really what I mostly do.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Paul, we all enjoyed your session yesterday, and you are on record now as saying that AI changes everything. Can you please explain what you mean?
Yeah, so, AI has been around for a long time, decades. A lot of people would say from 1956 in the famous Dartmouth Conference, which set out with a challenge and a belief that we could use computing technology to replicate or simulate, mirror human thought. And AI has been racing along, and it includes things like machine learning and neural network, Geoffrey Hinton's famous and groundbreaking work. It's actually the critical breakthrough that happens with the neural networks. And like all technological revolutions, it is not one thing that happens. It is the confluence of a number of innovative technologies that come together in one catalytic moment. And I believe that moment was in November of 2022, when ChatGPT was announced. And now all of a sudden, anyone had access to AI, and your interface with that technology was no longer through esoteric programming languages, but was natural language. You could just talk to it, and it could talk back. And we've seen an unprecedented adoption, 100 million users in just a matter of weeks, unprecedented investments. And part of the reason is that when you think about a breakthrough technology, it tends to be in a silo or vertical. So you have a breakthrough in genomics, and all of a sudden medical science and biology accelerates, and now we can do new things. You have a breakthrough in physics, we can do new things. You have a breakthrough in engineering, you can do new things. AI cuts across all sectors and lifts all verticals in incredible ways. So if you know the example of DeepMind, the work of Andrew Ng and colleagues out of England, they did in days what teams of doctorally qualified medical researchers were taking years and decades to do, which was to identify the 3-dimensional structures of the protein folding. And one team might spend 10 years to identify one. DeepMind did 23 of them in a week. Medical research thought and there's a wonderful article in Science, and I will send all these references, which I will use in the next 50 minutes to all of you. But a wonderful article in Science magazine with one of the world's renowned experts in this field saying, I never in my lifetime thought we would see a full catalog of these structures, and we have all of them. This is the stuff of breakthrough, change the world medicine. This is the basic building blocks of life. This could unlock cures for cancer, around aging, around Parkinson's disease, amazing things. And this is just one example, one after another. And what I think has been startling is the speed of improvement. So it is no longer measured in a year. New foundation models, or pioneering models, are leapfrogging the best performers in a quarter. Every 3 months, we are seeing quantum improvements in the technology itself. So that in 2016, AlphaGo actually defeated the best Go player in the world, Lee Sedol. So Lee Sedol, and Go, if you aren't familiar with it, is considered the most complex game of strategy. It's incredibly popular in China. In 2016, when that moment happened, a little bit like when Deep Blue beat Gregory Kasparov in chess, when that happened, China awoke to AI. China realized this is something wholly different. That was AlphaGo. AlphaGo Plus, 21 days later, routinely beat AlphaGo 100 games in a row, and every world-class player it played. And it did so with no previous understanding of games played. So all they did was say, this is the game, these are the basic rules. And in 21 days, it played millions of games against itself and learned and became better, and now no human can beat it. And we're seeing this in knowledge area after knowledge area. So let me say why I think the advent of AI is tantamount to the invention of fire for human beings. Because for all of its current flaws, and it still has problems and lots of vexing issues we have to face. And we can talk about hallucinations, and we can talk about what it does and doesn't well. But here's where I stand, which is that we now have to accept that we're no longer the most powerful cognitive players on the planet. We now inhabit the planet with an intelligence that exceeds ours. And if you think about the Manhattan Project, which had something like 50 Nobel Prize winners that led to the invention of the atomic bomb, think about every new data center as being filled with thousands of Nobel Prize winners. And when you need more of them, you just power up more GPUs. And they don't sleep. They work 3 shifts a day. They don't eat. They don't complain. They consume ridiculous amounts of energy, and we should talk about the environmental impact. But this is unparalleled. And now this raises a question about, then what are humans good at? What will we do? Is this a net benefit? And we've all seen the Terminator movies, so we know how this could go wrong. How many of you have seen the movie Her, with a character who falls in love with his AI? That's happening already. The New York Times did a piece that was much discussed about a woman who fell in love with her ChatGPT. I think we will be startled at the rate of anthropomorphism. Brace yourself for a future where many of your friends and family will prefer their AI companions to their human companions. Their AI companions love them. They're always supportive. Sam Altman just did a new release of OpenAI, a new ChatGPT, and he talked about this is the most supportive version of the platform yet. And my co-founder of our company put in a question. He said, "Am I the best human being in the world today?" And it said, well, that's a complicated question, but all things considered, you would be considered among the best human beings on the planet today. Think about the narcissistic generation about to be born with AI telling them that they're just perfect and wonderful and right. Like, we have a lot of work to do to get this right, but we have these bigger existential questions, which brings us, and we'll talk about this, as a university, what is your role? What are you training people for? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But this is big. I mean, I still run into people who say, well, it's got all these problems, like, oh my God, you're betting on the wrong horse if you think that yes, it has many, many problems. We can talk about the vexing problems. They keep me up at night. But will this continue to accelerate? Will it get better at rates that are startling? So Geoffrey Hinton, widely sort of seen as the godfather of modern AI, he was the guy that came up with the idea of neural networks. The idea that we could, that the computer would move from simulating human thought to actually learning on its own. Grossly oversimplifying here. And when Hinton did this, he thought we would be decades away from artificial general intelligence. So this is AI that can pretty much do anything you need it to do. We're not quite there yet. He left Google about a year ago, or a year and a half ago, because he feared the speed at which AI was accelerating and the lack of guardrails, especially around the military uses of AI. And last year he came out and said, I thought we were at least 10 years away from AGI. We might be in AGI within 12 to 24 months. And there are a lot of people who think we're getting that close that fast. That's the game is sort of wholly changed at that point.
Well, that's really scary, but also exciting at the same time. Lots of thought-provoking ideas also here.
Sorry for the indigestion after lunch.
But this is good. We are just having another big bang on the audience here, so that different thinking started. So we'll get back to education in a moment. Yeah. But let's, if you have noticed, there, majority of the participants here, they are all concerned. They represent government and, of course, and others, accreditors and universities. They're all concerned about the workforce, right? So how, and the purpose, one of the key purposes of tertiary education is to prepare workforce, employable, to have employable graduates, and to make sure that they get into workforce, and then they are able to have a well-balanced life, career, a nice career ahead. And what is the impact of AI on workforce from your perspective?
Cataclysmic. So if in fact AI is better at processing knowledge than most humans, at least large swaths of knowledge making, certainly in the area of prediction, think about the implications of that. So let's take a physician, for example. Physicians are in the business of prediction. When you show up with symptoms, a doctor makes a diagnosis, which is a prediction. This is what I predict is going on here. Now let me order the test to confirm that. And when those tests confirm that diagnosis, they make a prognosis, a prediction of how this will play out, or the ways it may play out. And when they've done that, they prescribe a treatment, which is a prediction of what will work best given your age, weight, other health conditions, and so on. Prediction, prediction, prediction. Right now, AI is outperforming physicians on performance tests by a wide margin. There's even some belief now, and you all have heard this expression, a human in the loop. Someone says, look, I'm comfortable with the idea that AI might do a better job diagnosing what's going on with me and prescribing a course of treatment. But I'd still like my doctor who really knows me, and I trust Susanna, my physician. I'd like Susanna to review the results. A perfectly rational position. The research is now starting to show that when you put a human in the loop, it actually degrades the results. That Susanna, amazing doctor, she's seen tens of thousands of patients. That AI has been trained on millions of patients, right? Far outperforming her background. So David Attor, who's the labor economist at MIT, argues, among other things, to go to your question, Susanna, that AI will mean the death of expertise. That now you can have the best expertise at your side no matter where you are, who you are. So he says, for example, that AI might reinvigorate middle-class jobs, middle-level jobs. So in his vision, he thinks about a nurse in rural America, not close to good medical facilities, no access to good doctors. And now that nurse who has foundational knowledge, so still has to be educated, they need to know how to work with your body, set a limb, put in a PICC line, et cetera, also has emotional intelligence, oftentimes more than our doctors, in America at least. So we like that part of them. There are good human interactions. But now that rural nurse at her side with her device has the best doctor knowledge available, like the level that you would get at Mayo Clinic or Columbia Presbyterian, the best doctoring. And with wearables, now she can give incredibly high medical care to people who don't have access to it. So he would argue It costs a lot more to educate doctors, and it takes a lot more time. We will need far, far fewer of them. But we ought to divert those resources to training tens of thousands of nurses because the country needs them. And those are good jobs. Those start at $130,000 a year. I would predict that the information age jobs that carry the most status and wealth, in America at least, will be hugely displaced. So do you think the world's going to have as many accountants in the future? Not in your life. Maybe 10%. Do you think we're going to see this in law? We're going to see this in consulting? I was talking to somebody who works with companies who are preparing their IPOs when they're going public. He said they don't use their research analysts anymore. So the work that those low-level and middle-level analysts used to do, they're now using AI, and now it's an expert analyst at the high end who will still review. And we're still at a place where you still need to review, I would argue. But that's going to change at some point. We're going to see this in field after field after field. This has enormous implications for the world. I was in Delhi a year and a half ago, and the head of KPMG said the strategy, and who's from India? Anyone? Hands? Yeah. So the partner, senior partner at KPMG said, and he works in the higher ed sector, that India's strategy is to be the offshoring site for the knowledge economy. So we're not going to do the dirty industries. We're not taking steel or chemical manufacturing. You offshored America and Europe. You offshored that to China a long time ago. But we will do the offshoring of your information age IT jobs. What happens to India? Because those jobs are not going anywhere. Those jobs are gone. Now, it's never good to see massive displacement of workers. Never good for civil unrest, societal good, and so on. I have an argument that says information age jobs are often not very good jobs, even though they pay well. They're actually kind of soul-deadening jobs that don't make people feel very good. David Graeber, the very famous Yale economist, his last book before he died 2.5, 3 years ago, this is the name of the book, so forgive me, it was called Bullshit Jobs. And in that book, he argues, and he cites the research, globally, something like 65% of people feel if they stop doing their job tomorrow, literally no one would notice. And these are jobs that benefit the system that don't actually help people in communities. They're jobs about feeding the machine, as he would argue. Now, what happens in a world where if information processing is better done by computers and faster and more powerfully, and we can talk about the good and the bad of that, what jobs will we do? Think about what human jobs look like. And I'm going to speak about an American context because it's the one I know best. In America, our K-12 public education system is deeply broken. We should flood it with amazing teachers, social workers, coaches, staff, and counselors, and so on. We have broken our mental health care system. We use our prisons for mental health care in America. We need to rebuild a compassionate system of mental health care. We have an aging society, but any American who's trying to afford care for an aging parent or grandparent knows it's almost impossible. We don't have affordable child care. Like, you could build an economy of care that AI will help, but it won't take those jobs. Those are human jobs because they require empathy, connection, sense-making, reading the body, and so on. And in my view, my hope is that the golden age that we might eventually come to is one in which we let the computers do those soul-deadening information economy jobs, and we actually start to pay teachers, and we start to pay early childhood workers, and we give them status in ways some countries do, Finland, for example, much cited, and that those jobs make people feel great when you treat them well in their jobs, when you pay them well and support them. They make their communities better. They make other humans better. That's my hope for what could happen. But I think we are just not prepared. There's no policy discussion that I've seen in the US, certainly, about what's about to happen in terms of workforce. And it's going to be massive. It has huge implications for universities.
Yeah, and this is really thought-provoking for all the institutions and quality assurance providers who are here. And going back to education, well, after we have talked a lot about, workforce, what do you think the universities and tertiary education institutions should be thinking about AI and the role of AI in education?
Yeah, I'm going to ask my colleagues. I prepared a slide. I think this question comes up a lot. Like, all right, so you made a bunch of big pronouncements. So here's what's not going to happen. It's not going to happen overnight. We're going to see tremendous backlash. We're going to see policymaking interfere, or rightly put guardrails around things. So I don't want to suggest that this happens overnight, but it'll happen faster than maybe we think. About a month ago, the largest bank in Singapore laid off 4,000 people, all replaced with AI. These are harbingers. The latest version of ChatGPT 3 Omni, not yet available to the public, on performance tests now outperforms 99.5% of software engineers. Think about that. Outperforms 99.5% of software engineers. So Mark Zuckerberg at Meta recently said Meta will employ far fewer software engineers in the future than we do today. So if you have a computer science department, if you're training software engineers, you better start thinking about what that looks like. So I think about university challenges, and to that extent, then by extension, your challenge and quality assurance in 3 phases. So here's phase 1. Here's what we know, in America at least, last May's graduates from university, 65% said they felt that their universities had not prepared them well enough for the use of AI tools. Coincidentally, in the same week, 70% of employers said, we will not hire someone who doesn't possess the AI mastery that we expect in these jobs. That gap is huge. So universities, I would argue, their first impulse right now has to be, are we preparing our graduates for the world that we know at this moment? Even though we know it's going to change a lot, are they coming out ready to get the kinds of jobs they need? And related to that then is, so if I were still a university president, I would be asking every faculty member, every department chair, and every dean to be reporting to me, how are you thinking about this? If you're graduating an accountant, what tools do they need to use? How's that work changing? What are employers expecting? If you're graduating somebody into the medical field, what does that look like now? How's that changing? Second thing is, we see an abject failure to provide faculty, staff, and students with clear guidance. And students want it. There was just a recent poll in the US, and majority of students are saying, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to cheat. Everyone thinks, oh, they're all going to cheat. They're all using AI, but they're desperate for clear guidance on how to do so. There's a very good new white paper guidance for student use from Elon University and AACNU, the American Association of Colleges and Universities. I'll, again, include this in the link, but I was a reviewer. It's not why it's good, I was a poor reviewer. But they have very clear guidance about here's how you should think about these things. So, we cannot expect faculty to do this on their own. And I think one of the things I really resist is when I hear university presidents say, well, we're leaving it up to our faculty to decide. They are singularly unprepared to do that. If I were a creditor looking at a university, I would be hammering those schools on, let me see what your enterprise-wide or university-wide guidance is, and walk me through ethics, walk me through responsible uses of AI, walk me through how you're talking about academic integrity. We could have lots of arguments about what the answer should look like, but they at least have to be addressing that question. So that's an important piece as well. And then I think if you're looking at a world in which universities have to navigate a technologically driven revolution, which is what AI is, do you have, as quality assurance people, the right questions around their technology? Do you have the right questions? Do they have the right questions about their data infrastructure, for example? If you think about AI as a Ferrari, data is the fuel. And if that university's data is sitting in silos, fragmented, not together, not in a way that allows it to use it, it cannot make good use of this technology. It will not do a good job at it. Not to mention questions of privacy, security, what are your policies around this? So right now we're in the messy phase 1, and there's a lot of fundamental or foundational work I would argue that universities need to do. Second thing, middle term. This goes back to Susanna's question on workforce, which is, what is your theory? What is your theory in your particular country? What do you think is going to happen in workforce? How do you think AI will play out? And then what is your portfolio of offerings? As I said, if you're an American university today training software engineers, you really have to look hard in the mirror at what you're doing, right? You got to either rethink that dramatically. Now, McKinsey, by the way, does not take my radical position. So they're smarter than I am. McKinsey would say it's not so much that so many jobs will go away, but it is that 65% of them will be dramatically re-engineered. So that's kind of a middle ground if you want to sleep better tonight. In that case, same question. How are you thinking about your product portfolio? And product portfolio means what are your majors? What's the size of those programs? Are you going to keep pumping out people for programs that don't exist? And we already see a softening, at least in the US, in the market for new graduates. It's already happening, and people are not sure about what they should be doing. And then I would say, again, starting to look at your AI agenda. Do they have the leadership? Do they have the capacity? Do they have the tools? Do they understand the questions they're asking? So I sit on a foundation board, and we had a proposal from a university, and they wanted to spend a lot of money to pay an outside firm to write GPTs for their faculty. And yesterday, those of you in our workshop, Rachel showed you how you could do one on your own in 2 days. 2 days of just practice, you would write your own GPTs. And we had to say back to them, so what that flagged or signaled, this is a university that doesn't actually know the field yet. They're trying to do the right things, but they don't have the expertise internally to know what the right thing is. So again, if I'm doing quality assurance, what is your plan? What is your plan for AI? Who leads it? Do you have someone who understands it, and so on and so on? And then lastly, this existential question. So I want to come back to the work of a woman named Carlota Perez. Again, I'll send you the reference. She's Venezuelan-British economist. She lives south of London. She's in her late 80s, I believe. I have been a huge fan of Carlota Perez for a long time. And someone just introduced me. I told my wife, I was like, honey, I would never leave you for anybody else, but there's an 88-year-old woman south of London that I might consider if she would have me. Carlota Perez argues, she's a historian, she's an economist who looks at technological revolutions. And she would say, AI is not the revolution. We are 50 years into the revolution. The revolution is digital computing. So chapter 1, digital computing. Chapter 2, connection. The internet, the World Wide Web, social media, all the good and bad, so on. Chapter 3, AI, maybe the most powerful chapter yet. 50 years into this revolution, here's what we know historically happens. It happened with industrialization, happened in other eras as well. You get huge displacement of people in their work. That leads to huge unhappiness. So voter dissatisfaction, population dissatisfaction. Last year, across the globe, in every democratic election, the incumbent government was thrown out with the exception of 2, Mexico and South Korea. And South Korea flipped a couple of months later, so call it 1. Right? Whether it was left or right, people are angry. People don't recognize a world and don't see a world increasingly that is for them or for their children, and they don't know why. It's just changing so fast. And they're angry at their leaders, and they're angry at their political system. Second thing she says, you'll see, rise in populism. Look at America. Look at a lot of other places. Third thing you'll see, the rise in dictators, autocrats, and strongmen. We're living with that nightmare in the US right now. My apologies. Next thing you'll see, wars. All this sounding familiar? This is what happens. And then the rise of monopolies. So 7 technology companies in America represent 1/3 of the S&P 500's value. Just 7 companies. The billionaires, the wealth inequity, unprecedented. So a small number of billionaires now own more wealth in America than something like half the population. So she says, all of this is predictable, all of this is happening. So how does this play out? So what Carlota Perez would say, it inevitably blows up. It breaks. And when it breaks, and it breaks in a variety of ways, the state has to step in. And the state can't be the state as it was built for the old world order. It has to be the state reimagined for the new emerging world order. If you prefer Antonio Gramsci, the early 19th century Italian Marxist philosopher, he talks about the same transition. He uses different language, but essentially describes the same thing. And he says, it is in this period between the old world and the new world where monsters are born. I love his thinking about this. It's very poetic. But going back to Carlota, what she would say is that the state reinvented has to step in and fix it. And the question the state has to ask, it's always the same question, is what does a good life look like? Let's think about that for a second. What does a good life look like? So in the middle of the Great Depression in 1935, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the American president, tried to answer that question in a new way. In the darkest depression, when people were starving in bread lines in cities like New York, we'd never seen anything like this. Huge migration of poor people, the Dust Bowl was happening, all of this stuff. And he said, being old shouldn't equal being poor. So he created Social Security. He said, you shouldn't have to work 90 hours a week to feed your family. So he created a cap on the work week and minimum wage ideas. He was coming up with new answers to this question of what does a good life look like. And if you had told somebody in 1935, hey, in just 20 years, there's going to be this amazing future in America. There's going to be a thing called the suburbs, and you may have your own home, a single family home. And you'll have a car in the driveway when no one you know today owns a car except rich people. And the percentage of money you spend on food, it's going to plummet. And by the way, there's this wonderful thing called refrigeration, and you're going to get food out of season that you never dreamed of. And on and on. People would have said, you're a lunatic. They wouldn't have been able to imagine that future 20 years later. But it is the future that happened. Two things to remember. Before we could get there, we had to have World War II. In fact, a lot of the technology advances that made that bright future happen came out of the war. So what Claude Perez says is, historically, we have always gone through the transition. It has always been awful, and you always come into a new golden age. And it is easier to rebuild after an earthquake than to renovate the existing model. But here's the thing. You have to survive the earthquake. And in America right now, we're trying to figure out who survives the earthquake. This madness will end, and we will have to rebuild. And I was just on a panel with former US Secretary of Education Arne Duncan and John King and myself talking about how do we reimagine the US Department of Education in 4 years when this madness ends? What does it look like? And the answer is not to go back. The answer is to say, how do we reinvent? So I think the answer, the question everyone has to ask is, if the question for society is, what does a good life look like? The question for universities is, and what is our role in making that life possible? And in an age and in a future where our AI companions are cognitively smarter than us, we have an invitation to go back to the higher order human factors of empathy and love and kindness and community and care and things that, at least in my own society, have been neglected for too long. Sorry, that sounded very preachy, I'm sorry.
Well, this is really amazing. I mean, like, okay, if AI is so good at transfer of knowledge, and we already see all these, examples, good, bright examples there, how do you see the role of faculty evolve?
So faculty roles, I think this is going to be such a delightful invitation, and it's going to be rejected by so many of our colleagues. So the invitation is to know that we can, and with Matter in Space, what we're trying to build is a platform that is better than the best teacher a student has had. And it's not built for competing with universities. It's built for all of those people globally who don't have access to a good teacher, to a university, to good schools. And we think we can do this. And I can talk about this why, but I don't want to make this about Matter in Space. But if you think about how that gets deployed in a university, think about the flipped classroom on steroids. Think about so much of teaching is about knowledge transfer in the university. I'm passionate about my field. I'm going to passionately fill you with knowledge and send you on your way, and you'll be passionate. But what if I can build a platform where all of that knowledge transfer, all of the tutoring when students get stuck, all of the making them feel like they matter, all of their wellness, all of these are things we're trying to integrate in here. What if that can be done away from the classroom? So then what for the teacher? The more important thing, which is when you bring your students together in class, you now get to curate community. You get to enrich. You get to build community. You get to get students interacting with each other, right? Way more interesting, way more important, and way less attractive to many of our faculty colleagues who really just want to talk about what they study and they love. But I think that will be the invitation and the challenge for the future.
Paul, you wear so many hats, and you also served as commissioner in US regional accreditors, and you also were on NASICI doing accreditation of accreditors or evaluation of evaluators, which we talk so much about. And we see that in like global study demonstrated that there are only 22% globally have been externally evaluated of those accreditors. So there is a huge gap there. What do you think quality assurance should do, and how should quality assurance embrace AI in changing its old practices?
And there's a way of embracing AI in your work that is really like every organization about how to get more productive, how do I generate more work, or you can do a whole lot. But I made a checklist, if you could go to the next slide, please. And if I were doing quality assurance, these are the questions I think I would want to be asking, which I can't see very well from here, but maybe, Joan, could you just turn this monitor? This one down here. Nope, this one down here. Can you turn it? Fabian, it's on wheels, thank you, because I'll be able to see more clearly. Thank you, perfect. So these are things we touched upon real quick. Does the university provide its students and staff with comprehensive guidance? We talked about this. Internal capacity, training and support, huge need. Adequately preparing its students, rethinking teaching and learning the way we just touched upon. Like, how are you asking your faculty to rethink this? Think about assessment. If you use writing as an assessment tool, you now have an out-of-date instrument. How are you going to think differently about this? How will you think about writing? How will you think about assessment? I have a deep belief in the future of smart glasses. I should have brought mine. I have a pair of Ray-Ban Metas. They look just like this, except they have a camera in the corner. And I think, imagine assessment now where I can actually have a student working on something, performance-based assessments, because we're looking at outcomes and competencies, and they can record it. And now I get to sort of evaluate that work as it was happening in real time. Or let's think I'm working with someone on soft skills like active listening. And that student can go into a group meeting that I've curated and designed and say, hey, everybody, Professor LeBlanc asked me to record this meeting. Is that okay? Great. We do this on Zoom all the time, right? I just hit the button for record. We record this. And this is stuff we're building now, by the way. And now at the end of that session, I have a transcript. And I get to say back to you, hey, Vic, and we use AI to do the parsing of the transcript. Hey, Vicki, there are 3 times in that meeting where your active listening skills were great. Do you want to review them? And she's like, yeah, I'd love to see that. So she goes through. And then it says, but there are a couple of times when they weren't great. Let's look at that. What do you think happened here? Vicki says, I don't know. What did I do? Okay, let's do a little role playing. These are all things AI is really, really good at. So I think these are the kind of questions that we want to see universities thinking about. And then that larger question of plan and process for rethinking its future, its offerings, and so on. So we have enough time, I think, if we go really fast to show a video.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Can I? So I did a little 5-minute video because we can spend all day talking about the problems, and they are considerable. And we could talk all day about the technology. Really interesting if you get enough into it. But one of the things we wanted to do was, with Matter in Space, what we're trying to build is, what would a positive vision of AI in education, what could it look like? How could it be used to serve underserved populations? How could it be used to connect people? How could it be used to center human experience as opposed to replacing it? And we don't want, like we've said, if we're so good at this that we have young learners in bedrooms by themselves in the dark thinking they're dealing with a human teacher, we'll pull the plug on the whole project. Like, that's not the future we're building towards. So we created this video. Excuse me. It was shot at the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. It's one of the poorest places in the whole country. It's 3 generations of this young man with AI in our near future. So if we could dim the lights and play it, it's 5 minutes long. So, and then I know we have to end. But
Thanks a lot.
are we in your way? I think we're in the way, Susanna. That's good. We're good? Okay.
I got my co-pilot today. Everyone came to watch. I'm the first in our family to have one.
Hello, Dakota. Iyushiki and Wachionke. It's nice to meet you.
He'd ask me questions.
What matters to you most?
I want to help. But when it came closer, I saw it was a cloud of beautiful butterflies of all colors. We call her Zonta, trustworthy. They swarmed around me so thick that I could see nothing else.
Great pace, Dakota. You did really well today, but let's pause for now. You didn't get much sleep last night.
I know she isn't alive, but I feel like she knows me. 5 more minutes?
Wagmisa, Wagmu, Naomnicha are known as the three sisters. They grow better together than alone because each nurtures the others. It's a teaching from our indigenous relatives to the east called companion planting.
For a long time, we lived in balance. But now, it's harder.
Dry soil and low water resources have put wheat production in the mid.
Rising sea levels are inundating coastal communities, displacing milk. Mason bees are the latest pollinators to be escalated from vulnerable to endangered, joining a cohort of other keystone species.
We need a change. Today, Santa introduced me to Sophia.
My favorite is the monarch. It has the most.
She loves butterflies.
Animal. Well, technically, they're insects. They used to be everywhere. But I don't know anyone that's seen one.
Her home is very different from mine.
Mathematics can help us understand patterns. From this flower to the spiral of our galaxy. Monarch caterpillars only eat milkweed. It's essential to their migration. Can you tell why this one is struggling?
There's so much to learn. I'm glad I don't have to do this alone.
Sophia, Zanta, and I have grown together, like the three sisters. We've been working on a new project, solving a problem close to our hearts.
Let's take a moment to lower your stress. They're growing together nicely. This one looks viable. Great job, you two.
There's a lot of us now. Changing things. Making them better.
Sophia?
Flutter of one butterfly's wings can create an impact a world away. Imagine what we could do with more butterflies.
So we wanted to end on a hopeful note. Everything you see in that video is something we're working on today on our platform, including smart glasses. As I said, I have a deep conviction that this will be the device of the future. It's the way we will interact with the physical world, ourselves and our AI. wellness, integrated wellness and well-being. There's a mental health crisis in the US among young people. So we have built in AI therapy, and it's complicated and you have to be very careful, but we have a team of licensed psychologists who are building out that piece. And I think it's a way of thinking about so much of the world doesn't have access. We do a lot of work at SNHU with refugee education in Africa and the Middle East. We just don't have the tools and the capacity to serve the number of people, and we think we can do this at a radically affordable price. So I didn't want to make this about matter and space, but I will say that if anyone in the room, in 2026, we will be looking for partners globally in places that want to try these platforms and think about the upskilling and reskilling needs of their populations. We'd love to talk to you, so just email me. But thank you so much, Susanna. Thank you for having me. I know we're over time.
Impressive.
Oh, thank you.
That's just one simple word, impressive. And this is the response to the UNESCO Futures of Education report, which they published in 2022. So it's really actually tangibly seeing what it looks like. Now we're open for questions from the audience. And I know that you have ignited lots of questions out there, so.
I want to say, Vicky, I don't know your colleague's name. I see her in the back of the room. She was in the workshop yesterday. And she made something that stayed with me, and I wish I'd been more appreciative of this before coming. Remember I said the state steps in? You're the state in many instances. Like, you may be playing the most important role in thinking about this question of AI and post-secondary education with all of its vexing problems. Like, I talked to a lot of audiences about this, but I don't know if I've talked to a more important audience. So I'm rooting for you to get this right. So don't mess it up, please. The world needs you to get it right.
We have Earring. And then Scott.
Thanks, Paul. That was a very inspiring, your thoughts. I think we can't hide anymore. If I look at students and the examination system, which you exposed as an example, in German universities, they are now rethinking entirely the way of examinations. So they no longer care about multiple choice tests. They no longer care about all the reports, what they expect of students, and that's the danger for the students. What they grade is number one, how did they use artificial intelligence to come up with what they hand in? And now comes the dangerous thing. What are their new conclusions? Because the best artificial intelligence is not coming up with new things. They are reproducing the best which was thought so far. So what is graded is, what are the new ideas? When we come to artificial intelligence, my own staff members, they are now writing better reports than they have ever done. I'm really impressed about now the new quality of English, and everything is now fine-tuned. What I'm missing, and that's again the challenge. Now you have a chance. You no longer have to think about like reproducing and taking what has been thought before, but it's about, how to speak, what do you do with this information to guide a university in the future? You as a university president, you have all the chances to use artificial intelligence for new research, learning, and administrative purposes. But you, as a university president, you have a new role to fill. So what I'm saying essentially is, doesn't matter whether you're a student or you are the CEO of an accreditation agency or you're a president, you are challenged as never before. If you agree that we are graded on what we are producing new, what would your reaction to this position? Is that a fair conclusion?
It's a great question. And I think, so one, I would be careful because you're right. AI is trained on, like OpenAI is now trained on all existing published information in the globe. I mean, it's crazy. It will get better at producing the new. What AI is really good at is pattern matching across systems. So it does give us new insights and better questions. But I think your main point holds. So here's one of the ways I think about this, which is a technology that makes you smarter versus a technology that gets something done. When I use GPS in my car, it doesn't make me smarter. It gets me to the place I want to go. I really learn nothing along the way, unless kind of paying attention. But that's not the GPS, that's me, right? If I read a map or an atlas, the act of finding my route on a map actually makes me smarter. I start to see spatial connections, where things are. Oh, I didn't realize we were so close to the coast and there's another way to get there. It makes me smarter. So one of the ways you might ask of your staff or your students or your programs is, are we using AI to raise our cognitive game? Or are we using AI to simply do things for us? And it's not a bad framing question. And when you do the raising game question, you actually raise the cognitive bar, to your point, I think. So I was a writing teacher, and I had this discussion with writing faculty who said, we have to ban AI in the classroom. Students can't use it for writing. I said, so let me get this straight. You want to ban them from using the very tool that will get them a job when they graduate? Well, no, but just for writing. I was like, how about we rethink writing? And so here's one of the fundamental things, and I think you touched on it, and unintentionally you were echoing it, which is we're going to have to stop thinking about product and start thinking about process. And what I would say to the writing teacher is, I would say to my students, I need you to use AI to produce writing. But here's what I'm going to review you on, or assess you on, which is, what were the prompts you wrote to get that artifact done? How well do you know what you were trying to do? That's a high cognitive task. And then after it's done, I'm going to ask you a question, which is, how did you make it better? How did you put it in your own voice? How did you fine tune it for the audience? To your point, AI writes in a kind of pretty good, but not great. How did you do that? And then the last thing I would ask is, where that paper makes factual claims, how did you know? Because AI hallucinations are way down, like down to 2%. That's better than most human beings. Like, I know a lot of people who give me hallucinatory answers all the time. But weirdly, and we don't know why, if you use the new reasoning model, which are amazing, you get to see how the AI is reasoning, the hallucination rates are back up to 30 and 40%. And the AI companies don't know why. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, it should go the other way. My point is, it's really now about teaching process and asking, are you using the tool to do smarter work? And the easiest way to test this with a student, for example, or a staff person, is just put the technology away and then ask them to talk to you. Because any good teacher knows that within 5 minutes, you can tell if someone really knows their stuff or not. And AI will actually allow that kind of assessment as well.
Thanks a lot. Scott?
Yes, thank you very much. Paul, thank you. Excellent presentation, very fascinating subject. Yesterday in our workshop on sustainability in higher education, we heard from Steve Chan. Steve, I think you're here somewhere. But he was expressing a concern about how much we actually know about what's happening on the planet right now. Particularly, he comes from a low-lying island state in the Pacific. We know what's going to happen. We know these people are going to be displaced. At best, they may die at worst. We don't really need any more artificial intelligence or human intelligence to know what the problem is. We need to find different values and different policies to prioritize different behaviors. What can you say to us that will reassure us that AI won't distract us from the much greater drama going on, is that we're not living sustainably on the planet, and we need to change our behaviors. We already know that. We don't need a machine to help us learn that. We need to teach ourselves how to behave differently. Tell me that there's still hope that AI won't distract us from this other drama taking place, that it's more existential, and obviously it is going to happen.
Yeah, so I mean, climate change is our existential challenge right now. Policy isn't working, so we are not winning that race. And people often say to me, no, aren't you worried about artificial intelligence? I like, human intelligence isn't all it's cracked up to be these days. So maybe a little artificial intelligence could help us. I'm not a technophile, but I would say that it may be that AI will give us some answers around critical things that could combat climate change. Not just predictive modelings, because that just tells us how bad it's going to be and when it's going to be bad, but actually breakthroughs on energy, for example, cold fusion. I mean, things that seem like science fiction could become possible. It's one of the things Carlotta Perez says is that the seemingly impossible becomes possible. The intractable becomes movable. So I do have a hope that researchers and technological folks will start to find new answers for the kinds of issues that have thwarted us for so long in this front. And yes, it has to be policy, and yes, it has to be values. There is a, I think, radically positive view among some who see AI creating an enormous world of abundance in which we stop consuming things and we start consuming experience with each other and so on. I don't know if I quite believe that. I don't see it yet. I see more threat. But the reality is that AI really now are being driven by huge corporate interest, and they've never shown any compunction about not destroying the planet when given an opportunity. And these huge data centers are an environmental nightmare. It is interesting that we quietly have loosened constraints in the nuclear regulatory industry in the US. And I believe this project is happening in India, but I'll have to get this straight, to do small mini reactors to fuel data centers. And that they're using AI to create new, clean nuclear energy, but in micro plants that would fuel this and not drain carbon, reduce the carbon footprint of these things that draw on water and all kinds of other things. It's a race we're not winning, and I hope AI becomes a tool that might allow us to make more progress than we're making on our own.
Okay, and just as a follow-up, what should higher education people be doing and saying in this debate in terms of what the institutions are doing and what quality assurance is doing to support them? We should have a voice in this process as well.
Yeah, so research, which has always been our forte, at least for lots of the university sector. So I was at NVIDIA recently, which is the maker of GPUs and the main maker of chips that fuel AI. Their latest chip is 20x more energy efficient than the current model, which is really remarkable. Not 20% more, 20x more. And that came out of research that they were doing in conjunction with universities. That's one. I could channel my friend Brian Alexander, the futurist at Georgetown, who would say, we gotta be teaching climate change, critical thinking, policymaking. Young people are acutely aware that they may be on a planet that will not sustain life, that they're choosing not to have kids. So they're a receptive audience. We've got to be better about how we're teaching. And then we've got, as universities, to model those practices. And that includes, by the way, responsible uses of AI in your day-to-day life. My wife loves ChatGPT, but she asks it questions. It's like some simple thing. I was like, honey, when you do that, you just use like a year's worth of electricity for a house in Eastern Europe. It's sort of like we're using ChatGPT to answer simple questions like using a tractor trailer to make a rundown to get a quart of milk. I mean, this is disproportionate use, right? So there's a lot of work that we have to be doing on this front.
Thanks a lot. And I guess
I think we're at the end of time.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Paul.
Thank you so much. You're a great audience. Really appreciate being with you.
Okay, colleagues. So my challenge is to shift from energizing discussion to very mundane practical matters. So the breakout sessions will start at 3 until 6:30, until 4:30. 3 until 4:30. So just mundane practical matters after this energizing presentation. That's my challenge. We'll have a coffee break, and then after we'll have a session, panel session on micro-credentials. So stay with us. Thank you.